A fellow DM told me about a cursed amulet one of his players had. They never checked to see if it was cursed, they just put it on. It absorbs and negates all offensive magical spells against the wearer, direct or splash damage. What the player didn't know was that every time this happened, the DM kept a list of each spell and the amount of damage it would have done. Well, about 3/4 of the way through the campaign, one of the party members asked the wearer if they can borrow the amulet. They were in a city, restocking before their next quest, and as soon as the player with the amulet took it off, boom, 4 out of 6 players, dead. This is one of those 4D chess genius moves you see from dungeon masters on Reddit or Twitter, but then you think about it for more than 5 seconds and realize that would be really annoying.
So, you gonna take off your necklace?
Yeah, sure, I'll take off the necklace. I mean, we're in a safe space.
Well, as you take off your necklace, there's a massive explosion of all the damage the necklace has been blocking, and you are all dead. Cool, right?
Well, I mean, my character's dead just like that? I guess the cleric can revive.
No. Yep, they can't revive you because they're dead too.
So we're all dead? The entire group in the area just like that? Really? You've got to be joking, man. I put 5 pages of backstory in this character and he's gone just like that?
What do you mean? You didn't check that the necklace was cursed. You should have seen that coming.
You never foreshadowed the necklace was cursed. There haven't even been cursed items in this campaign. What even?
Maybe that'll make you think twice when playing Dungeons and Dragons, huh? Especially when playing with a DM like myself. Man, you know what? Actually, can we pause the game? I need to talk about how stupid you guys are on Twitter. Give me a second.
I'm in a tabletop club at my university, and one of the DMs wanted to start up a short 5th edition campaign at level 10. I decided to join in with a wizard, with the other players bringing along a ranger, a sorlock, and the star of the show, a barbarian. It took around 3 minutes of us sitting at the table for the barbarian player to start going on about how optimized his build is and how he's going to be the best member of the party. Something, Pam plus Sentinel plus Guam, yada yada yada, to which I smile and nod because whatever, man. As long as he's happy, I think we're all chilling. We start the session and start talking to a quest giver for the quest, and the barbarian proceeds to try and strong-arm and intimidate an otherwise nice and friendly old man who offered a reasonably high reward for a job. I told him to back off, to which the barbarian got mad, as apparently he was close to getting more money, and you ruined it. He withdrew from role-playing after that, pretty much sitting quietly until we got our first combat encounter. Then he perked up and we started combat. The barbarian went first, and after a smug round of around 50 damage, he passed the turn to the sorlock, and to no one's surprise, the sorlock did sorlock things and outdamaged the barbarian. Oh, sorcerer warlock, how did it take me this long? Barbarian questioned the sorlock about exactly what he did, grilling him for every feature and every interaction before slowly breathing out and... Okay. He began complaining about how casters are stupid and overpowered and needed nerfing, rambling on and on as I casted web and passed on. After the combat was over, he started acting like a prick towards the sorcerer warlock in character, which the DM let slide. At this point, he just wanted to move on with things and continue the story. I was a bit irked by his behavior though, and asked Barb to cool a bit. He raised an eyebrow at me and told me, "You don't bring anything valuable to the party. You suck in combat and won't even let me roleplay my character how I want. Check yourself." I told him combat isn't the be-all end-all and that he could play his character however he wanted. So of course, he did the reasonable thing and played his character how he wanted by attempting to attack me. The DM sighed and tried to break it up, but I told him it'd be alright. I was a blade singer, his attacks missed. It was my turn, and I casted Wall of Force on him, turned to the rest of the party, and we walked away, leaving him behind. The barbarian told DM he can't do that, but the DM just shrugged and continued the story as if nothing had happened. Without the barbarian's presence, the barbarian asked to see if he could roll survival to track me down, but our ranger interrupted with a small, I guess, pass without trace. The DM paused, shrugged, and told the barbarian that he'd gotten lost in the woods, never to find the party again. The barbarian picked his things up and left the club room, looking less than pleased. The DM looked like he was having a headache before asking for a few minutes to rebalance the encounters for 3 people. The rest of the session was great, by the way, ending on a pretty cool cliffhanger. I saw the barbarian again at the next club meeting, but he refused to look in our direction and joined another group's one-shot. I can only pray that they had a better time than we did. TLDR, min-maxing barbarian gets wall of forced and leaves the table. A great reminder that while there are a lot of just blatantly overpowered, good in almost every scenario D&D builds, most min-maxing builds are great in most scenarios. However, there are other scenarios where they're less great. Like, take a flying, eldritch blasting Aarakocra. That's really overpowered until you're indoors, or there's a tree line, or a dragon. Barbarian had all that hype, but at the end of the day, a wall of force did him in, which, yeah, that's gonna happen when you're being a cocky dick. I've said it many times, but in-game solutions are no solution to out-of-game problems. The real problem here is the barbarian is being a dick, thinking that he is the best, thinking that he owns this game, owns this table. However, you don't. You're all just a part of a team. You're all pieces in the machine. You're not the whole machine itself. Barbarian wasn't trying to be a part of this group. He was trying to make it all about himself, which, yeah, that is never going to be a good thing in a group role-playing game. When talking about problem players, it's important to distinguish that a crappy player can be a good friend, and a good player can be a crappy friend. However, with Joseph, it was clear that he was both a bad player and a bad friend. I met Joseph on a Discord server running a homebrew setting with Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Most activities and games were small sessions connected by the same setting, and characters with different dungeon masters. I had formed a small group of friends, and we often hung around. One player in our group, Taylor, had joined at the same time as Joseph, and as such, formed a sort of bond together. When Joseph's character died, it created a shift in Taylor's character and caused the start of a still ongoing character arc for her character, going on 2 or so years now. Joseph began to slowly hang around our group more often, something we didn't mind at first. They talked about the game and showed interest in the same things, but soon enough, Joseph would start to show his first red flags. Though in the moment, we would take this as a minor inconvenience, or, oh, that's just Joseph. He rarely played with us as a character after his first character's death, mostly sticking to being a DM on our server. Joseph dominated voice chat with talks about his other hobbies, his life, his thoughts on the game, his thoughts on the setting, and generally anything. If he thought it, he said it and he let us know. We could get him to stop talking over others after a gentle reminder, yet this behavior was something he continued up until the last time I talked with him. If he wasn't talking over someone else, he would frequently complain about the system we used. He was a diehard 3.5 fan, and he would constantly rules lawyer or argue the flaws of 5th edition. Now, I agree, the system has its flaws, but none of us seemed to care or agree with him, which made it all the more aggravating when we wanted to talk about something else. He kept trying to talk about 3.5. There was this other player, Raven, whom I had a crush on, while Joseph also had a crush on her. It led to an awkward out-of-character situation, with Joseph feeding me information that eventually led to the relationship between Raven and I dissolving, though thankfully the messy drama eventually resolved into all of us deciding to remain mutual friends. However, Joseph still exhibited simp-like behavior, and for a while the debate was a sore spot for me. Raven seemed to take things in stride and tried not to make things awkward for us. There's a lot more I can say about Joseph. At times he was a close friend and confidant, and at other times he was running over to your crush to tell them that, "I'm so glad that you two are in a relationship." Some notable moments include: he openly had NPCs flirt with player characters despite the player's wishes or comfort. His games had bizarre rulings that he listed in a Google Doc that he would edit mid-session to cement his authority as a DM and keep track of his rulings. Joseph coming into calls drunk and or high just to tell us how much we meant to him, something that felt very contradictory to the things he did while sober. He created a foil to my character by taking everything that made her a character and trying to invert it, and only ended up being extremely inflammatory and offensive. He was constantly explaining out-of-character concepts to us, bringing the in-character action and intrigue to a grinding halt. Yet the situation I regale today is perhaps the last straw many people in our friend group had with him. We were playing in a session set on a small island cursed by foreign magic that made our magic items stop working. It was a fun plot for intrigue, exploration, and roleplay. We had a few players who had originally come from this island and wanted to learn more about this land to break its curse and tame its wild, wacky magic. Raven was one of these players, and she was very into the story that was presented, as well as her character. But none of us got to resolve the plot after the stunt Joseph pulled. Raven coordinated with the DM, not Joseph, to run a session with the express purpose of exploring the history of this magical island. As Raven's character and ours were friendly, we lent our aid and followed her on this expedition to discover more about her land's history. Her character was one of the few from this island. When Joseph heard that Raven was leading an expedition in character, Joseph quickly made a character before the session so he could tag along with us, and more importantly, with Raven. If we had any complaints with him joining, they did not matter. Joseph's character was a fighter or a wizard or something. I honestly can't remember. It's been like a year and a half. It was designed to be the Mandalorian. Yeah, in this roleplay and exploration-heavy session, he wanted to play a bounty hunter that was ripped from the screen of a television show. The session went badly. Joseph constantly tried to wrestle control of the group from Raven, which led to her becoming noticeably stressed and irritated with him, which made him mope and pout since he had hurt her feelings. Raven would have been much more open to his suggestions for leading the party if he had understood why we were undertaking this adventure and why we were following Raven's lead. In combat, he was very headstrong and pedantic on his turn. He tried to help us on our turns and frequently tried to correct the Dungeon Master on obscure rules regarding his homebrew monsters. During out-of-character planning and discussion, he constantly brought up Star Wars and his new character, which interrupted us and the DM. The final straw came with the temple. It was a small pyramid-like structure that we solved a small puzzle to get into. Inside was a square room with the walls covered in engraved gold. The gold was engraved with the history and lore of the island, a small clue, and our first big lead on the history of this place. As we were exploring the room and a few smaller side rooms, Joseph was quiet. Then, after a while of us role-playing and collecting artifacts for study, Joseph spoke up. "Yes," the DM said, "finely engraved gold with depictions of... Well, I did the math. Based on the perimeter of this room, this gold should be more than enough for my character to retire. I want to start peeling the gold off of the wall." We sat quiet for a moment as that sunk in. Joseph laughed at his declared action. Not malicious or creepy, but a laugh that implied he thought the situation was humorous to him, as though he had just beaten the DM at his own game. Raven was the first to object, trying to explain how that absolutely defeated the point of the session and the point of the expedition. The other players tried to talk him down too, stating that we would not take kindly to such an action against our in-character friend when it came from a stranger we just met moments ago. When all was said and done, the DM confirmed with Joseph that he still wanted to do this, which of course he did, so the DM tried his best, asking Joseph to roll stealth or sleight of hand to start chipping off the gold. By the time one of us in character noticed this, we had already taken about a foot of the wall off. Our characters rightfully told him to stop and to get lost, that he was defacing an ancient site. He responded out of character by saying that this was the fastest way for his character to retire, and "it's what Mando would do." Yes, Din Djarin, the honorable warrior of the Mandalorian people, would definitely take great pride in defacing a place of cultural significance. He then acted surprised we had turned hostile, since apparently we didn't warn him that we were against this sabotaging action. We ended the session shortly after, and we left the voice call with Joseph. It was wrong looking back to leave them alone and give them the cold shoulder, yet at that moment we all did not want to deal with his behavior. We never really figured out what exactly the monument was for, or what the history of the island was. Enthusiasm for the plot died overnight. We kept some of the characters around and had a good time without Joseph's character, and we still play together till this day. I apologize for making this so long, but the more I began to write, the more I began to remember the little things that made Joseph so toxic. Thank you for reading. This post gave me a good bit of catharsis, especially after so long. TLDR. Player hogs voice chat, simps after a girl, tries to insert himself into a session being led by that girl, and then gets the cold shoulder after they blatantly sabotage the plot. Well, at least you sent a clear message. I think this is better than keeping this person in your game for 20 plus sessions, letting them ruin your entire experience along the way. Now, of course, you are right. A direct message is best. You can't solve a problem if you don't tell the problem what's going wrong. However, this person is being very frustrating, and I don't blame you for wanting to bail out when they're acting completely idiotic. I mean, I gotta feel for Raven. This is the chance for their character to shine, for their character to get that little bit of spotlight. I mean, if you're a player character, often you look forward to those moments where you really get to let your story shine and you get to experience it alongside the other players. However, this guy just had to jump in and ruin the whole thing, and that's why, as a dungeon master, you gotta be really careful who you let into your game. I know it sounds mean, but at the end of the day, these are stories that you're telling with your friends, and if you let someone in you're gonna regret, you might regret it for a long time. Enthusiasm for this entire plot was lost, so yeah, just make sure to check up. And letting the guy who's simping after the girl into the game, well, maybe not the best idea if you want that girl to have any fun with the plot. I'm not exactly an experienced D&D player, but I'm very into tactics games. I got a new job and they invited me to a during work D&D group. I've never really cared about Dungeons & Dragons, but getting paid to play, I mean, that sounds great. Fast forward a year and a half, and at an hour a week, we are almost to the end of the first dungeon, soon to find the dwarven stashed treasure. I had earned the nickname Leroy Jenkins for recklessly charging into rooms. I kept doing this because I didn't, and still don't, understand why it's reckless to walk into a room after doing a listen check, spot check, trap check into the area by multiple characters with high stats on each. The other players ranged from thinking it was funny to one player messaging me after games thanking me for moving the game forward. The person who didn't appreciate it? That would be the Dungeon Master. He told me outside the game how reckless I was and how I should let the tanks go first at least. I was confused by this until a couple new players joined as tanks. I'd been specking into a tank druid. I brushed off his comments since I was a tank as well, and he did not like that either. Finally, we got into an intense fight at the bottom of the dungeon against some very powerful drow. Ironically, this fight started by us seeing them from far away, and not from me charging into a room. I rolled high on initiative, and being a melee fighter, I moved forward to engage. While I sped forward outside of combat, in combat I am much more careful and split up my movement going forward instead of just charging in with my full movement to get to the group of drow mages. I stopped about 10 feet ahead of my closest party member, still about 30 feet away from the enemies. Turns out, there is a giant summon hiding behind a wall that got an opportunity attack on me, and several more enemies jumped out. This was him proving my quote-unquote recklessness. Unfortunately for him, I really was a tank and continued to heal through the damage throughout the battle, despite being the primary target of attacks even after other party members stepped out in front of me. Unfortunately for me, the DM had an ace up his sleeve. All of the enemy mages had a unique spell from 3.5 called Destruction. You get a fortitude save against it. If you pass, you take 10d6 damage. Our party average was 100 health each, with me at about 110. If you fail the save, though, you are destroyed completely. Not even ashes are left. I was morphed into a troll to buff my fortitude, but even with that, the roll gave me a 20% chance of failing. I passed the save and took the damage the first 3 times it was cast on me, and even healed back to 80 health, but I didn't pass the 4th time. The DM private messaged me that there was a way to resurrect me if the group paid a large amount of gold and traveled for what would be 3 to 4 sessions, and they might do it if I begged them. Then the DM told them that they were close to finding the treasure as the fight finished. The player that likes when I move the game forward offered to pay for my resurrection, but no one else seemed to really care that I died. I'm planning on leaving the group. I don't care enough to go back and hear the DM talk about how he taught me a lesson about charging in while the rest of the group begrudgingly travels for several sessions to bring me back. The problem is that the DM will probably have it out for me. I had a good laugh about it with my friend who is an avid D&D player and told me to post the story here. Look, I understand. Sometimes D&D players can be really cocky, really arrogant, and not check their corners, so to speak, but come on. This is way too much. First and foremost, this player is checking their corners. They are being careful. They're waiting for the group to make sure the room is safe before going in. So they're not Leroy Jenkinsing in. I wonder if the DM just has it out for this person because they're a new player, which, if that's the case, is really, really stupid. There's a bunch of annoying stuff here. The whole resurrection quest taking 3 or 4 sessions. I mean, come on, at least let them pick a new character while that's happening. On top of that, the blatant targeting during the fight, the nonsensical lecturing about recklessness. I mean, come on, D&D is supposed to be fun, yet this DM is treating it like a job where he is the world's worst manager. So the important actors in the story are my character, an Owlin, and Dampier, this will be relevant later, Rogue named Yini, DM, and Sorcerer. This all happened a year or two ago, in a campaign that has ended since due to the story wrapping up. The story up till that point was that our group was working for a kind of large mercenary company, and had recently wrapped up a job involving dealing with a cult who worshipped a shadow monster thing, which turned out to be a random tiefling guy named Keith, who had this honestly really cool set of shadow magic abilities, allowing us to have a little demiplane and the aforementioned shadow monster transformation. Well, after a moonbeam revealed this cult was worshipping some random mage guy, they disbanded, and the party opened their arms to let Keith tag along, since he didn't have anything else really going on. I had Yini, my character, take a liking to him, offering to be the one to properly look after him and protect him in case things ever went south. When we got back to our employers, I made a special ring made for Keith and Yini to wear, which would keep Keith nearby at all times, with a decent amount of leeway, of course. That way he couldn't be pulled away from us, and we could always be there to defend him. I compared it a bit to the ring Lenore gave Hector in the Castlevania anime, since I had recently watched it at the time, and Lenore was my most recent character obsession. The DM agreed to it and had it be Yini's payment for the job. Well, there was a couple days time skip before we got to our next job, which was to defend a chapel from some monster attack. As the party reconvened after a few days of downtime, the DM had a very interesting description of Keith as he changed his clothes. Notably, he was covered in scars from scratches and bites, notably hand-sized claws, and bites from bird beak/vampire fangs. All the while, Keith seemed scared of my character. Yeah, basically they implied Yini abused Keith and also got rough without his consent. I gave absolutely zero indication Yini would ever do that. Like, I played her to be a bit promiscuous, but never as somebody who would do that. I ultimately didn't say much because I'm a very shy person who avoids conflict, and I guess we moved on. So fast forwarding a bit to after a combat defending the chapel where we kept Keith inside for safekeeping, well, as we returned to tell people in the place that we're safe, Keith decided to try and remove the ring. Remember what I said about how I compared it to the one from Castlevania? Well, I don't know if I said it couldn't be taken off. I might have with the intention that others couldn't remove it, because the DM had Keith take the same approach Hector did in the show, aka cutting his finger off. After all of that, a lot of other NPCs, and even a few players, completely in character by the way, got really hostile and standoffish towards Yini, and rightfully so, from a Watsonian standpoint, considering she was, a rapist because of the DM. Fast forwarding a couple of months to another campaign that group was doing with me in the DMing chair. Since our group was IRL and Sorcerer didn't have a ride, I usually drove them to and from where we had our sessions, and mentioned how, because of that, I kind of started to feel icky and gross about Yini, not really feeling comfortable playing her in other campaigns for fairly obvious reasons. Sorcerer agreed hard, saying it made them feel uncomfortable as well, and the other two agreed and talked to the DM about it. There's a happy ending here with the DM apologizing, it was all retconned, and everyone moved on with little further issues, at least to this degree. Like I said, DM is still a close friend of mine who we played with, and we still play with them to this day, and someone who I defend to my final breath most of the time. If there's anything to be gleaned from this, it's to talk to the other people if there's an issue like this cropping up, whether it be with a DM or another player. The other people in the group need to know about it. I get it can be daunting to try and confront someone yourself, for a lot of people especially, but it feels a lot easier if you do it with someone else, and a lot of the time, something problematic tends to make others uncomfortable as well. I think comparing yourself to Lenore from Castlevania was a big mistake, considering that Lenore is quite evil. The ring, if you guys are unaware, that Lenore made wasn't just to keep track of Hector to, protect him. She made that ring to enslave him to his will so that she could force him to create a demon army so her and her sisters could take over the world. Yeah. However, on the other side of that coin, if the DM does interpret your desire as evil and extremely NSFW, then the DM needs to ask. Doing this stuff without your consent or permission is absolutely unacceptable, even if your point of comparison was flawed. No matter what, content like this needs to be clarified. No matter how good your friendship is, sometimes aspects of people's personalities are going to go over your head because you can't read other people's minds. Probably for the best, let's be honest. Sometimes you're not going to know everything that your friend is comfortable with and uncomfortable with. So ask, especially when it comes to content like this. And that's it for today's episode of RPG Horror Stories. If you guys enjoyed, then please do leave a like. If you want to see more of our content, then you can check out our Tabletop Tavern Tip series, where we cover advice for both DMs and players. Its hiatus is ending soon, so check it out in the cards. And while you're there, subscribe to Crispy's Tavern to get more of our content as it comes out. And finally, if you want to leave your own stories or thoughts, go down in the comments down below. If you can't think of a comment, leave the comment min-maxer eliminated to let me know you made it to the end of the video. Hey, by the way, you can send your stories to an email, link to the description. But even if you don't have any stories, it necessarily comment, subscribe. I'll see you all next time. Farewell.